Good evening, everyone. I am back for another James Bond review. I, of course, am Chris, and I'm here tonight to talk about Quantum of Solace, which is the 2008 film. It's the direct sequel to Casino Royale. I'd say it's the first direct sequel in the James Bond legacy. Maybe that's up for debate, but we'll talk about that as we get into it. This is, of course, directed by Mark Forster, starring Daniel Craig. We are very much into the Daniel Craig era of the Bond films now, with only a few weeks left. We've got, 3 weeks after this, haven't we? We've got Skyfall, Spectre, and then No Time to Die. So the end is in sight, and I do have some other plans for another franchise to take on after all this is said and done. Maybe even some other franchises, plural. There's lots to talk about. There's a lot I want to cover, and I've basically done 2 straight years of James Bond right now. So now that we're coming up to the end of it again, it should be interesting, though, to kind of get a fresh opinion on some of these films. I do want to admit the fact that, unfortunately, I couldn't make it to the cinema tonight to see Quantum of Solace, and it appears that Quantum of Solace is going to be that one film that, it was the one James Bond film that got away. I can now say I've seen every single James Bond film in the cinema, apart from Quantum of Solace, because the first James Bond film I ever saw in the theater was Skyfall, Spectre, No Time to Die. I've now gone back and watched all of them from Dr. No up until now, but unfortunately I couldn't make it to the cinema tonight. Work called me in late, and I was working till 8 o'clock, and by the time, driving back, I couldn't make it tonight, unfortunately. So it seems that Quantum of Solace is just that Bond film that got away, that I never got to see in the cinema. But I have rewatched it tonight after I got back in from work, just, on the small screen, just to, to refresh my memory of it and to still get like a fresh take on it. I've actually, this might be embarrassing to say, I think Quantum of Solace is probably one of the Bond films that I've actually watched the most. I did start like an edit of it in my free time, which I actually really need to get back and finish at some point. So I feel like I've seen the film more times than I probably should have done. Before we dive straight into this thing, please do consider subscribing to the channel for more reviews, discussions, and live streams. I actually went live last night for my review on Cobra Kai. So if you haven't checked that out, please do go and do that. That's Cobra Kai season 5. It was a lot of fun to talk about, and it was even more fun to watch. So please do go and check out my review on that. I would very much appreciate it. And also follow me on Twitter as well. You can find me at Hobbit Fan Editor. I'll post all the live links of when I'm going live and the times and everything like that, and also give you hints as to what's coming up on the channel as well. So do consider following me on there. And of course, let me know what you think of Quantum of Solace. This is a very interesting Bond film in that I think, it might not have won anyone over, but I definitely think people are not so hard on this film now. I think when this film came out, a lot of people were saying it was one of the worst Bond films, and maybe they're still correct about that. But I don't know. It feels like people have eased up towards it now and are actually finding more positives in the film, because there are some positives in the film. There absolutely are. There's also a lot of negatives that I have, and like any Bond film, most Bond films have some positives and negatives to them. So hopefully by the end of this, I don't even know how long I'm going to be talking about this one, because I don't really feel like there's a whole lot to say, because as I say, I have watched this film fairly recently. Next week is going to be the big one, though. It's going to be Skyfall. That's definitely going to be one that has a lot of talking points about it. So that's going to be Tuesday, the 20th of September, again at the later time of 11:30 p.m. British Standard Time. While we're at it, please do let me know which is your favorite James Bond film and who is your favorite actor to play Bond. Maybe it is Daniel Craig. I don't know anyone who would say that Quantum of Solace is their favorite Bond film, but hey, maybe someone's favorite Bond film is. I don't know. Oh God, you clearly need to watch more Bond films if this is your favorite one. But anyway, Quantum of Solace. What can we say about this? Like, first time watching this was on DVD actually for me. So the first Bond film I ever watched was Casino Royale, but that was on DVD. When I was at school in sixth form doing media studies, I can't remember why, but we were watching clips from Casino Royale, and I actually thought it looked pretty good. So I borrowed the DVD from them. I watched Casino Royale, and I really enjoyed it for what it was, although even then I wasn't a massive James Bond fan, but I just thought it was a decent film. And now, subsequently, Casino Royale is still probably in my top 3 favorite James Bond films, or at least top 5. I'm not sure where it would be. It'd probably be in my top 3. And then I think I watched this one, Quantum of Solace, right before Skyfall was coming out because I realized, oh yeah, there was another James Bond film before Skyfall, and I wanted to watch them in order. And I think I borrowed the DVD from someone for Quantum of Solace, and it was just infinitely forgettable to me. Um, it's also the shortest James Bond film, so I don't know if that's got something going against it as well because it doesn't clock in at over 2 hours. There were a whole lot of things that were against this film right from the off, really. Chief among them was the writer's strike around that time, and I remember when it happened because a lot of TV shows that were coming out were really bad, were really quite bad. The one that comes to mind for me, I don't know if anyone watched this TV show when it came out, was a TV show called Heroes. Heroes had a fantastic first season. I think it came out right around the time that Lost was coming out, and I think Lost and Heroes were like the biggest two shows at the time. Certainly in terms of shows that were getting people talking. And then season 2 of Heroes came out during the writer's strike, and it was considerably shorter. The quality wasn't there, and it really, really dropped off. SeaWorld, man, you got to stop asking for pictures of my room, dude. You can see my room. This is my room. You can even see the reflections of my weapons in the window right there. You see them? There you go. Yeah, so there was a whole bunch of stuff around that time where, the writer's strike, a lot of projects were really, really hurt by it. And Quantum of Solace was certainly one of those films. One of the biggest problems I have with the film, and maybe you could make an argument here that, well, you could potentially make it work. And I think they could have made this film work had they have had, more time to plan it maybe and better writers and everything like that. The fact that it is a direct sequel to Casino Royale, I think, really hurts this film and really hamstrings the first beginnings of the Daniel Craig era, because there's no reason that this needs to take place directly after Casino Royale. And to me, this is kind of chasing after what was the original idea for the sequel to On Her Majesty's Secret Service. They were planning a direct sequel to that film when it came out, where Bond was... after the death of Tracy, he was going to go on this massive revenge mission against Blofeld and, Blofeld's henchmen. And I think at the time, I don't know if it was Broccoli or one of the producers in general read the script and they didn't like the script. So they chose to go in a different direction, and we ended up getting Diamonds Are Forever. The first part of Diamonds Are Forever, I guess you could say in a way, is almost like a direct sequel to On Her Majesty's Secret Service. It's Bond on a revenge mission trying to find Blofeld. He seems a lot more aggressive than normal, and it seems like he's really a man on a revenge mission. But then in a way, you could also say it could be a sequel to You Only Live Twice, because Blofeld got away at the end of that film and he could just be chasing him after that. So it's potentially loose continuity with On Her Majesty's Secret Service with that one. But I guess that was their attempt to sort of tie up the loose ends maybe from On Her Majesty's Secret Service. But this one, it's really frustrating that this takes place right after Casino Royale, because where Casino Royale ends off, itself being a soft reboot of the franchise, being like an origin story for Bond in many ways. Like, by the end of that film, he achieves his 00 status and he is James Bond. And it ends with that. The name's Bond, James Bond. Cut to credits, James Bond theme plays. That is our origin story for the character. Now in the next film, we want to, get him jetting around the world and get him on some missions. But we don't get that. We pick up directly after where Casino Royale left off, which really hamstrings the film in terms of development for Bond, because he just wants revenge, basically. He's just filled with regret and anger and resentment towards everyone, for the death of Vesper. The continuity isn't great, I would say, if you are kind of watching this from Casino Royale into Quantum of Solace, because this might be a slight thing, but it's something that you notice. Bond's suit at the beginning of the film during the car chase, when it's meant to pick up directly after he, apprehends Mr. White, is completely different from the one that he has at the end of Casino Royale. So whoever was, creating this film or whatever really didn't pay attention to exactly, the same circumstances as what Bond was dressed in at the end of Casino Royale. It's a slight, small point, but it just does really annoy me every single time when you see that. I think he goes from like a 3-piece suit to like I can't remember, but the suit's completely different color and different design and everything like that. So it is a little bit irritating if you were to watch these back to back as a double feature, but I'm sure most people don't even notice that. And yeah, I think the reason that I find it frustrating, this being a direct sequel, is because just of Bond, in terms of Bond's development, to me, the character arc that Bond goes on in this film is exactly his character arc from the first film, and it feels like they've just hit the reset button, and we're repeating exactly the same character arc from Casino Royale. You know, towards the end of that film, he's filled with anger, and you know he hates Vesper, and by the end of it, M kind of talks him down, and you know he rises above it. He apprehends Mr. White, and the name's James Bond. And I actually thought that was a really good origin story for the character, because it would then explain why he can't open up to people, why he's a womanizer, because he can't show that vulnerable side to him again. He can't open up. He can't fall in love again, because the last time that he fell in love, he was completely burnt by Vesper, who betrayed him. And I thought that was such a cool way to integrate that into the story, and to show that, he's just going to get that quick, no attachment, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, out the door. And then he's on to the next, it's his way. It's like any addiction really is, from his heavy drinking to, to just getting through women like there's no tomorrow. It's his coping strategy for the job that he's in and everything that he has to go through. And the fact that he can't open up and have another relationship again after Vesper. And I feel like we got all that from Casino Royale. So it's really frustrating to see him just go on a revenge mission in this one. And then by the end of the film, put everything of Vesper behind him and move on and become James Bond again, become the agent that M needs him to be. He kind of goes off the grid on this one. He's just a man out for revenge. And, yes, there is a bigger picture at place with the organization that is Quantum that would eventually become Spectre. They couldn't call it legally. They couldn't call it Spectre at this point. But, following this, everything was ironed out. And then eventually we did get the Spectre film where legally they could bring Blofeld back into the fold and have the Spectre organization and everything. Dominic Green and Mr. White, all of that stuff at play. So there is a bigger picture there, but it does feel like a very small scale film. And I've always compared this film to, it feels like you've bought a game on PlayStation, or on console or something, and this is the $10 DLC story mission pack. And it's like, it's fine. It doesn't really add anything to the main game. It's like an hour and a half long. And that's it. It doesn't really add much to the greater picture. But I guess it's kind of like a nice little epilogue, maybe. I just really don't think this film was necessary. And I think it was a real missed opportunity to really just advance the story. This is the point where now, at the end of Casino Royale, that was our origin story. We get Bond to where we know he's the Bond. He is James Bond by the end of that film. He's not nobody. He is James Bond. So your next film, you want to take James Bond, now that he has achieved that character status, and just take him out on some adventures. Go back to the formula, get some awesome, memorable villains in there. You could still keep it with a more modern, not darker, but, the more harder hitting edge to it. That's absolutely fine if it works for the modern audience. But it's just really annoying that this takes place directly after, because if you review now the Daniel Craig era as a whole, it doesn't really feel, his progression is really all over the place, really. And I always equate it, and I think I mentioned this last week in my Casino Royale review, it feels a lot like the Dark Knight trilogy. There's actually a lot of comparisons that you could make to the Daniel Craig era, certainly with Skyfall and No Time to Die, with the Dark Knight and the Dark Knight Rises. But in the Dark Knight, Batman wasn't Batman for very long. The first film is an origin story. He becomes Batman by the end of it. And then you think, right, fantastic. The next film, we want to see Batman later down the line as, he's achieved his Batman status after he's been operating for a good few years. And you don't really get that. The Dark Knight picks up a year after Batman Begins. So even by the Dark Knight, Batman's still very green. He's only been doing it for a year. And then by the time that Dark Knight Rises rolls around, we find out that after the end of the Dark Knight, Batman went into hiding and stopped being Batman for 8 years. And then in Dark Knight Rises, he comes out of the shadows and he's Batman for a couple of months again. and that's it. And then Batman dies. So cumulatively, Batman is in the Dark Knight trilogy. Batman is only Batman for maybe like a year and a half, which isn't very long at all. And the progression of Bond in these films is really frustrating. I feel at the end of Casino Royale, that was then your cue to, skip ahead a few years, and Bond's got a few missions under his belt and he's out on another one, and do the same for Skyfall as well. Have that just be another mission. It lacks those episode. It lacks that episodic feel to it of Bond going on all these different missions. So really, narratively, you have to kind of consolidate Casino Royale and Quantum of Solace into almost one big film, because they do take place directly after one another. And then when you get to Skyfall, and I guess I'll be talking more about this next week when I come to my review on it, when you get to Skyfall, it feels like a Bond at the end of his career. He's kind of aged up a lot more. He's weary of the job. He wants to quit. He wants to retire. And a story like that for Bond would be fine if it took place right at the end of Daniel Craig's era or towards the end of his career. So we never really get to see that interim period of Bond just going on loads of these missions and really... Do you know what I'm trying to say? We never really get that progression of the character, which is a little bit irritating. But anyway, I'm repeating myself. So, yeah, the writing really hamstrings this film, because although I don't necessarily like that this is a direct sequel, if they were going with that angle, I do think there are a lot of... Thematically, there's a lot of cool ideas in this film. I like that both Bond and the Bond girl, played by Olga Kurylenko, they're both out for revenge in many ways. And they both kind of get it in their own ways, but it doesn't complete them as humans. And I really appreciate that. And I think it's good to offset Bond with someone in a very similar state to him who also is out for revenge. I think that's really cool. The problem with this film and watching it again is, well, number one, it's short, so there's no room for development. And whenever you have a scene where the pace of the film slows down a bit and we're really going to let these characters breathe, we then skip to the next action scene. And it's really just a film that never lets up. And it feels like it's almost a race to the next action scene because of the writer's strike, and probably because they didn't have much time to pen the script or to come up with some like really interesting sort of mature, fleshed out ideas to it. It feels like the only things that they had going for this film were the action scenes, because you don't necessarily need a script for that. You just need spectacle. You just need choreography, and you can do that quite easily. Let's see. JX says, oh, good to see you again, though, man. I like that the kiss at the end is really awkward. This isn't that kind of movie where the two protagonists need to hook up because they're the protagonists. Yeah, no, absolutely. I caught that this time round as well. I feel like Wonder Woman fell short in that regard. Yeah, no, I agree. So, I mean, Olga Kurylenko definitely does serve the role as the Bond girl, but there's no sort of intimate connection there. And when there is, when he goes in for that kiss at the end, she even kind of acts really weirded out about it. And she talks about that, he can't open up, and his inability to be intimate and to really connect with everyone. And he kind of cuts her off mid-sentence and just goes in for the kiss. And you can tell that it's a defense mechanism for Bond. Like, what she's saying is completely true, and he doesn't want to hear it in that moment. So he just goes in for the kiss to just end it, just to maybe tell himself that that's not the case. And it's a defense mechanism. And she kind of acts like that too. She has this knowing glance to him, like, you're kind of doomed to walk down this path. And I think even for her, even after she does achieve her revenge, it doesn't really make her feel whole again. There's still a lot of, ambiguity to the fate of that character and what she's going to do now with the rest of her life. And I like how that kind of carries over for Bond as well. When all's said and done, what does he have left? And it's the job. It's Queen and Country. Or, well, that's topical, isn't it? Or yes, King and Country now. When this film came out, at least it was Queen and Country. But yeah, no, you're absolutely spot on there, JX. And I like that it isn't a typical romance. There's actually quite a few Bond girls throughout the whole Bond franchise that I kind of wish hadn't have gone down a romantic road. Michelle Yeoh's character, for example, in Tomorrow Never Dies, was a character who was more of a fellow agent in arms, really. And then when they do throw in a romantic edge to it, just because it's Bond and he has to get with the girl, it feels really out of place, and it doesn't feel like it's earned that in the film. So there's quite a few instances of that, I think, definitely throughout the Bond franchise, where you almost wish that he didn't get with them. And I appreciate this film for not doing that. Jack says, at last we shall reveal ourselves to Quantum. At last we will have revenge. Yeah. Okay, so Quantum. Let's talk the villains in this thing. So our main villain for Quantum of Solace. Well, you got a few villains in there. You got Mr. White, who's in the background, but Mr. White's just a bit nothing, really, isn't it? Sounds like a Reservoir Dogs character. We have Dominic Green. Does anyone remember Dominic Green as a Bond villain? Here's the thing. I think in terms of the acting, I don't think it's that bad. I actually like how slimy and weaselly the character is, and I think he plays it very well. The character just doesn't really have much going for him, does he? There's not really any memorable qualities to the character. He just looks normal, really. And I know that was the intention, because they wanted to say that evil can permeate everywhere, and he doesn't have to be this completely elaborate, large-than-life Bond villain who's got like a scar over his face or has got some kind of costume or something like that. They just wanted to showcase that evil can sort of like live among everywhere and hide in plain sight, kind of thing. And I do appreciate that. And I'm not saying that Dominic Green needed to have this wacky appearance, but I think it just comes down to the writing. There's not really much development there with the character. The actor plays it well. He plays him as like a sniveling lackey kind of character. But even when you watch the film, you realize that Dominic Green isn't like the head honcho of anything. He is just a pawn on the board, really. He's not a Silver, for example, that we get in Skyfall. He's not a Blofeld. Even like Rami Malek, who, oh Jesus Christ, when we get to Safin's character in No Time to Die, there's definitely a lot of problems with that character and how it was realized, but at least he's got kind of an angle to him, like his mannerisms, how he talks, the appearance of the character itself. He's slightly more memorable than Dominic Green. Dominic Green's just kind of a dude. And that's it. I don't really have much more to say about him, really. Maybe he could have been a bit more villainous. Maybe he could have got stuck in a little bit more, but he just seems really unintimidating, even when he's fighting Bond at the end with the axe and in the hotel that all of a sudden catches fire. That's a really clunky line as well. There's a line in there where, oh God, what's his name? General Drano. What's the guy's name? Let me find it on here real quick. General Medrano. He's talking to one of the other lackeys, and he says, like, any problems with the hotel? And he's like, yeah, the fuel cells are just really unstable. And he's like, yeah, that doesn't sound safe. Flash forward 10 minutes later when the whole place is on fire. It's just a expositional line to set up the fact that everything catches fire because we need this really dynamic ending sequence to it. I think that was part of the design as well. I know that the director wanted to have a sense that he wanted an action scene based on Earth, of all the four elements, basically, of Earth, air, fire and water, essentially. And you get that with, the quarry, I guess, driving through the quarry at the beginning of the film. You have the whole aeroplane sequence and the parachuting, which looks absolutely terrible, and I'll talk about that in a second, the effects in the film. You've got the speedboat chase, which covers the water, and then you've got the fire in the hotel. So I guess as like a visual signifier, if the director wanted to go for that, that's fine. But it is a very clunky line, and it just makes the whole fire at the hotel just feel really forced and orchestrated, rather than being an actual genuine surprise to the audience. Let's see. JX says, I thought it was cool that the bad guy's plot was actually rooted in reality, and I thought the whole doubling the price of water was brilliantly sleazy. Yeah, and it kind of shows, well, it's not Spectre during the time of this film, it's Quantum, but would eventually become, I think is it in Skyfall? No, it wasn't. Spectre. They still didn't have the rights to Spectre, did they, when they did Skyfall? They mention and they retcon it, saying that Quantum is some kind of subsidiary of Spectre itself. So yeah, and Spectre sort of not taking a nuclear bomb from a country or extortion or anything. I guess it is extortion in a way, but it's bringing the elements of Spectre and bringing it into a real world situation that they would hold a country to ransom. They would completely impoverish a whole, a whole group of people who are less well off, and use natural resources against them. The lack of water, for example, as you mentioned, yeah, there was in that place in the world, I think specifically, there was a whole water shortage, and this whole, I mean, I don't really follow politics or the news that much. And, granted, it was years ago in 2008 when this came out. But I do think it was rooted in real world stuff. And the James Bond films have always kind of done that to a point, or at least been influenced by stuff in the real world. Certainly with The World Is Not Enough, with Electra King, with the whole oil pipeline thing. I think that was based on something around the time to do with oil or some kind of war for oil. Let's see, you've got all the Cold War stuff really, in like the earlier Bond films, is all in direct relation to current politics. GoldenEye, for example, between the release of License to Kill and GoldenEye, there was a lot that happened in the world politically. The fall of the Berlin Wall, for example, and the dissolution of the Soviet Union, which then plays into the film as well and serves the backdrop for that. So there are a lot of moments that you can chart in the James Bond franchise where they were based, loosely based at least, on real world politics at the time and what was going on. SeaWorld Man says, please give your reaction to both Pinocchio and Little Mermaid, even though Disney's in the dump for you. Yeah, I haven't watched those trailers. I just kind of refuse to watch them because we know what Disney are like at the moment, and especially what they're like with their live action remakes. I don't feel like I really need to talk about them, but when I get some free time, I actually did want to do a catch up of all the stuff that came out for this like whole Disney thing, because there's a whole bunch. There's a bunch of Star Wars trailers. And it's been a while since I've talked about Star Wars, probably for good reason, because I'm just kind of done with it. It really upsets me how I'm just so... I feel like James Bond in this, just completely emotionally disconnected from it. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of trailers. I suppose there is a lot to talk about. A lot of Marvel stuff, which again, I'm just kind of over now. I'm just kind of done with Marvel. I think Disney have just, with Phase 4, they've just kind of ruined everything, as Disney tend to do. Let me find. JX says, I would say green's not intimidating, but anyone swinging around and acts like that can fuck you up. It's actually kind of funny. I don't know if anyone else has noticed this, but during that whole axe fight, Dominic Green lets out this sound. It's like a sound bite that he does, like this crazed manic scream. He's like, ah! Like it's kind of like a Wilhelm scream he lets out. And that sound bite happens about like 4 times during the fight scene, and it's exactly the same sound bite. It's kind of funny if you watch the fight scene and you listen out for it, you'll clock it, and it happens about 4 or 5 times during the fight. It's quite funny. Or maybe that's just something I notice. I don't know. I tend to notice really random shit in films. Let's talk about... I've got to talk about another negative now, and I hate being a negative Nancy on it, but there are a lot of problems with this film. It's not my least favorite Bond film. I will say that. I definitely think there are worse James Bond films. This at least kind of stays relatively true to it being a James Bond film. Number one, James Bond always gets out of the situation. It's got the womanizing elements in there. It's got, he can definitely throw down when it comes to the action. So yeah, it's got more of the core elements of a James Bond film, certainly, than a No Time to Die, in my opinion. It's a much more enjoyable watch and a much more brief watch than Spectre. Spectre's just this really boring, depressing, dour, almost black and white film. It's just so miserable and tedious to get through Spectre. Not to mention all the wasted potential of them finally having the rights to Spectre and the Blofeld character and just completely fucking it up in every single way. Quantum of Solace at least, keeps itself out of that, and it's kind of like a brisk 1 hour 40 minutes, and it's done. It moves at a great pace. It being the shortest Bond film, I'm sure it has to be. Do I think that No Time to Die is a better directed film and the action staged a lot better and it has better action in there? Yeah, absolutely. It's a much better made film than Quantum of Solace is. I'd say it's, would I say it's a better written film? Probably not. There's a lot of bad writing in No Time to Die and plot elements that make no sense. But at its heart, Quantum of Solace stayed true to a Bond film, way more so than No Time to Die ever did. So I'd put this film above No Time to Die personally. They're both bad in their own ways, but one of the things that really does irritate me about this film, and I guess this has got to be a marriage between the cinematography and the direction, is just how this film is shot, specifically the action scenes. That frantic, shaky cam, rapid cuts, like which is the Taken film where it takes Liam Neeson about 24 different edits to get over this metal fence. Is that Taken 3? I only ever watched the first Taken film, but that really frantic, frenetic editing style and shaky cam, and the director tries to be really artsy with a lot of the action scenes, and I don't really know what message he's trying to convey here. There's moments, for example, where it's the Mr. White interrogation at the beginning of the film, and I think is it in Spain? I think it is, isn't it? At the beginning of this film, is it? Let's see. I'm trying to remember. No, it could be Italy. It's either Italy or Spain. I can't remember where the beginning of this film is. I think it's Italy. And it keeps cutting outside to this big festival thing that's going on during the action scene. It will randomly cut back to the festival. I'm like, okay, but what are you trying to say here artistically? And you can tell he's definitely trying to be artistic with it, because he does that all the way throughout the action scenes. There's loads of examples of it where he does shit like this. The other one that comes to mind is towards the tail end of the opera sequence where Bond's chasing down, one of the members of Quantum, one of the informants. He's running through and he's chasing after him. He's running through the kitchens and the camera's going crazy and the edits are ridiculous and there's no sense of geography or sense of space or anything like that. And it keeps cutting back to the opera itself, Tosca. And I mean, I don't know the story of Tosca, but it looks like someone gets assassinated or someone gets murdered or something like that. And it keeps cutting back to these really artsy-fartsy shots from Tosca during this action sequence. And I'm like, okay, but what are you trying to say? It feels like the director's thinking, oh, this is really profound. This is really artistic. And Tosca is mirroring what is happening with the action right now. And it isn't. It's just a bizarre edit. It's just speeding the cuts up in the edit when it needs to sort of slow down. The camera needs to zoom out a little bit. We need to get that sense of space and that sense of scale when it comes to the action sequences, so you can really appreciate the action. And there are some interesting set pieces in this film. The bit where he chases down the Spectre agent or the Quantum agent at the beginning who tries to assassinate M, and he's running across the rooftops, and then they end up in this, I don't even know what you'd call it, but they both get roped by the feet, and it's like this teetering crane thing, scaffolding thing they're on. That's an interesting set piece. We haven't really seen anything like that before in Bond, and it's an interesting dynamic to throw in there, an interesting obstacle to throw in there for the action sequence. But the camera's moving around so much, and you just can't really get that sense of, the set or the stunt work and everything like that. And it's a shame because the James Bond films, for the most part, up until this point, have done a really good job of that. The stunts have always been on point. They've always known when to pull back and showcase the scope of it. And this one just feels very close quarters, and you never really get that sense of scope with it. Or, even like the exotic locations, you never really get that in this film. And it's a bit of a shame, I think. Got a comment from Craig. He says, "Just seen this in the big screen tonight. Guilty pleasure film, to be honest, but I love the tune." I can't agree with you, I'm afraid, on the tune. But hey, if you like it, that's totally cool. We all have different tastes in music. That's absolutely fine. I am kind of gutted I didn't get to see this on the big screen tonight, if just for the sake of completion. I'm kind of OCD like that, so it's going to break my heart now that I've seen 24 out of 25 Bond films at the cinema. But who knows, if Quantum of Solace gets a anniversary screening, or maybe in 10 years time when they do the 70th anniversary of Bond, maybe they'll put them all on the cinema again and I'll finally get to watch it. But I can see why this is a guilty pleasure. And this is what I was saying. I've seen a lot more people coming around to this film now. And, I don't think people are saying that this is one of the best Bond films by any stretch of the imagination, but I think people are finding the positives in it a bit more now. Maybe it isn't as bad as people thought it was. Maybe it just takes a worse Bond film to come out for us to go back to it. But this is what happens with the Bond films. I'm still fairly green when it comes to the Bond franchise and being a Bond fan. So rewatching them for me and marathoning them again, my favorites, constantly moving around the board essentially and reordering. And if I did another marathon at some point, I bet they would again. And that's just the way it goes. Let's talk about other negatives. I do have some positives. I'll talk about those in a second. The character of Strawberry Fields. Was it Gemma Arterton? Is that her name? Yeah, Gemma Arterton or whatever her name is. Absolutely pointless character. No development in there at all. She shows up. She's there to bring Bond back to the UK. He sleeps with her. She trips someone up down the stairs, and then they try and recreate that moment from Goldfinger, which really annoys me, actually. It's come up with your own iconography. Don't try and harp on the stuff from the films gone by. And that whole Goldfinger, that is such an iconic moment to Goldfinger, and it should always remain as so. And this one, they try and recreate that with Strawberry Fields dunked in oil. And I think I was doing some reading earlier. I don't know if it was the director or the writer or whoever idea it was to do that whole scene. But they said they wanted to reference Goldfinger because at the time, gold was the most valuable commodity of extravagance and everything. And they wanted to show that now in the modern world, oil was the most valuable commodity. So she's dunked in oil. Okay. It's just really random. Craig says, I like the fact that the last half of the film, he is in desperate need of a shower. Yeah. I actually do like that, though, just how beat up Bond gets. You really get that sense that he's a man on a mission. He's not sleeping. He's not freshening up. He is just, he's going to get the job done, essentially, which I really appreciate. And I like how you kind of see that disheveled look in Bond as he gets more and more desperate for revenge as the film goes on. Elements I do like about the film. There is actually one of my favorite scenes in this film, one of my favorite Daniel Craig era Bond scenes, and it's when he's with Mathis at the bar. And I think Bond's had 6 different Vesper cocktails, and he's just drowning his sorrows. He's constantly drinking the cocktail that reminds him of the woman that he lost, the woman that he loved and lost. And I like how I like that Mathis is back in this, actually. You can clearly tell that wasn't the intention there when you watch Casino Royale. Like, he is going to be interrogated in an inch of his life and then just thrown out there. So it's a little bit weird that he comes back and they make friends just like that after everything they've gone through. But I do like the character of Mathis, and I like the actor, and I think he plays it well, and I do think he has really good back and forth and chemistry with Daniel Craig's Bond. I like the way that Mathis is kind of disposed of in this film, in that it is really matter of fact. It just happens in the street. It happens quite sudden, and then Bond, again being completely disconnected, just throws him in the dumpster and, takes his wallet, takes everything that he needs and just says, it's what he would have wanted. And I like that Bond is like that. He's not one for pomp and circumstance or funerals or anything like that. He's just going to, dump him in the trash and then get on with what he needs to do. That's kind of the point that we've reached with Bond now in this film. And I appreciate that. And I think it works for the character. Other scenes that I like, I see a lot of people really praising the car chase at the beginning of the film, and I guess I would if I could actually see what was going on. I'm not a fan of that car chase personally, just because I can't take in the spectacle of it, or the stunt drivers or the choreography of it all, because it's all filmed, all over the place. It's just, it's like an earthquake's going off at the same time. JX says he wouldn't care, doesn't matter what he'd have wanted. Is that referring to Mathis? I thought he says something like it's what he would have wanted, but maybe I'm misremembering the line. Try and think of anything else from this film. Oh yeah, the CGI. I thought we'd got away from CGI in Bond films at this point after Die Another Day, whatever Die Another Day was. And you can clearly see that with Casino Royale. It was a return to form. There was definitely more practical effects in that film, more real life stunts and set pieces and everything like that. So when we get the parachute jump in this film, it looks like hot garbage. It looks really fucking bad. The plane CGI as well for a lot of it, which doesn't look great, but I can kind of live with that. But it's mostly from when they jump out of the plane, and they've got this really bad kind of like, I don't know if they actually were on one of those simulation things like the skydiving things where like your cheeks are just like flapping all about the place, but it looks like it's kind of been augmented with CGI. But it's mostly when they're falling through that chasm and you've just got this really bad, like motion blurred background, and you can clearly tell that it's not happening. And then the parachute just manages to deploy really quickly before they hit the ground. And it's just a really bad action sequence. And because you can just, you can just tell that they're not in that situation. So it just completely takes away the tension of the scene for me. We got another comment from Craig who says, it took me a few watches to realize that he spotted a guy at the opera grab a bag and realized that it was a communication tool for the criminals. Really bad writing. Yeah, I noticed that too. It's the little earpiece, isn't it? Does he get like a tie with it or something? I can't remember. It's like a little pin, isn't it? It's like a little stick pin thing. Yeah. I also think it's weird how Bond kind of outs himself as well in that scene. You think that he would just kind of hang back and just watch everything transpire and really take his time to work out who all these people are. But he kind of interrupts the conversation, which throws a spanner in the works, and then they all start escaping. And, like he's got them all where he wants them right there. I do think it's kind of funny as well in that moment when he does sort of like out them and says, I think you guys need to find a better place to meet or something. I think he says something like that during the opera scene. And loads of them just get up out of their chairs and start walking out, which then allows Bond to identify them, and he takes a picture of all of them and then, sends it back to MI6 and they work out who all these people are. If they'd have just stayed in their seats, then they probably wouldn't have been identified, or at least not identified as easily as they actually were. Mr. White's got the right idea. Dude just stays in his seat and Bond never finds him. So I don't know. It's just, I think that on paper, again, there was so much potential for that. An opera scene in a Bond film could be genuinely really, really cool. With the whole Tosca thing. And I think there was definitely enough stuff there. Spectre meeting at this public place. I think it's a cool idea that could lead itself to some neat visuals. But then, years down the line, Mission Impossible 5 Rogue Nation comes out with its opera scene and just completely blows this one out of the water. And to me, certainly compared to the modern Bond films, the latest few Mission Impossible films have kind of become what Bond should be, in my opinion. There's a loose continuity there, but they're very episodic in nature. The stunts are fantastic. And yeah, I don't know. They've kind of become the new Bond films for me. I really want to find more positives in this if I can. And I'm desperately trying to think. Like, I don't hate this film. I've watched this film quite a few times. I don't necessarily like it, but before you can even start to think about it, it just kind of ends. I guess I do like the final scene of the film. I like some of the cinematography in that last film. I like the low lighting. I like Bond waiting in that apartment, almost like, is it in Dr. No or From Russia with Love, where Sean Connery's just kind of waiting for someone to break in, and he's just sat there in the chair with the gun on the table ready for someone to come in. I can't remember if that's in Dr. No or if that's in From Russia with Love. But that's one of my favorite Bond scenes. It's just such a great scene of Sean Connery's Bond. And to a lesser extent, but in a similar ballpark at least, the final shot in this film, or the final scene, where Daniel Craig is sat in that apartment waiting for Vesper's boyfriend to walk in the dark, and he's got his gun ready. That's a really cool image. I like that. I like that it ends in kind of a sit-down conversation between the two of them, and the intensity. Oh, thanks. Yeah, people are commenting saying that's from Dr. No. Yeah, love that scene. It's a great Bond moment. That's actually probably one of the best, genuine espionage spy moments of of any James Bond film. It's brilliant. So yeah, I like that this film kind of ends with a conversation with Vesper's boyfriend, and he's managed, he's found a new missus very quickly, and he's promised her what is it, an Algerian love knot or whatever he said it is, the necklace. So it just shows that this is a thing that he hands out to everyone. And that would be enough to rile up Bond, especially everything that he knew about Vesper and how near and dear she held this necklace. That being said, it does cut away from the conversation. So I would have liked to have stayed in that scene a little bit more. I would have liked to have really, delved into that and fleshed out that conversation and how eventually he talks himself down from killing him. I like the final shot outside in the snow where he throws the necklace into the snow. I think that's really good. And, M saying like, Bond, I need you back. And he says, I never left. But even then, as I mentioned at the beginning of the review, it just feels like it's repeating the same character arc. It doesn't feel like it's taking Bond to a different place that we didn't see him at the end of Casino Royale. He had become James Bond at the end of that film and become the agent that M needed him to be. This one just felt like a really unnecessary epilogue. And I think the biggest problem of this film, other than the writing, which, I can't even be mad at this film, because it was done during the writer's strike and it affected loads of projects. And it's just really unfortunate that they came out of the gates with a fantastic soft reboot in Casino Royale, one of the best Bond films ever made. And then the next one happened to be this one from just, it was done 2 years later. You could clearly tell that they wanted to cash in and get the ball rolling with the franchise and didn't want to wait ages until the next one, which is actually really funny because over the course of the next few years, there'd be like 4-year waits and even longer waits for the next James Bond film. The gap between Quantum of Solace and Skyfall, for God's sake, is like 4 years. But I understand that with the hit that Casino Royale was, they didn't want to wait ages for the next one. So they wanted to kind of, rush one out as quickly as they could. And then the writer's strike just kind of fucked the whole film, didn't it? But I also think the thing that definitely does hurt this film is the fact that it's a direct sequel to Casino Royale, which I think really wasn't necessary. I think you could have still touched on a lot of the same story points that are in this film, but I just don't think narratively it needed to happen that close to Casino Royale, Yeah, Craig says there's no gadgets in this film either, and to an extent, there really wasn't that many gadgets in Casino Royale either. There was the defibrillator, but that's it. And it's not really a gadget, is it? That's just kind of functional. I'm trying to think if there are any other gadgets in that film. I mean, he had his gun, but that's not really a gadget. I honestly think that was just a modern take. I think that was just one of the things, they wanted to try and ground this franchise in a sense of reality, which I think definitely hurts the modern era of Bond. It definitely gives it an identity of its own, but it does take away a lot of the fun from Bond. And eventually we would get some gadgets coming into it. I'm not saying we wouldn't, especially when we get to No Time to Die, but when we do get some of those crazy gadgets in the film, it almost feels out of place because they've set the tone with these earlier few films. This is not a Bond that does gadgets. This is not a Bond that does quips. So eventually down the line, when they do start introducing more gadgets and gimmicky things and Daniel Craig's trying to crack one-liners, it's like, just stop. This isn't, just commit to a tone. It might not be a tone that I enjoy and is my favorite tone of all the Bond films, but at least it's consistent within itself. So yeah, it's a very turbulent era, really, I would say. I'd say it's an era of Bond that kind of lacks a lot of focus, really, between the films, which is a shame. JX says, could that subplot be lifted and added to Casino Royale? Are you talking about the bit where he goes to Vesper's boyfriend? I mean, I guess it could. You'd lose the Mr. White stuff, I think. Which actually, speaking of Mr. White, there was an alternate ending that was shot to this film where I don't know if it was after the scene of Vesper's boyfriend or if that was added in its place, but Bond went to Mr. White's apartment and shot and killed him. There was a line where he says the name's Bond, James Bond, boom, shoots him, and then that's the end of the film, and I think it goes straight into the credits. I think you can find this scene. I think there's like a rough behind the scenes footage of him pointing the gun at Mr. White in the chair. I actually think there was more to do with the minister in this. I've forgotten the name of the actor and I've forgotten the name of the character, but the one who M's talking to, is it the Secretary of State, I think? Yeah, that was it. The British Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs and Commonwealth, for Foreign and Commonwealth Affairs. I think there was more of a subplot to do with him, and I think it turned out in the original draft that and they may even have shot this as well, that he was a part of Quantum all along, and it was another example of how in deep Spectre, Quantum have integrated themselves into, you know, the British Secret Service, and that there is literally, you can't trust anyone. And I think that would have been cool. It seems like there's so many of these different subplots and everything that, had they have been added to the film, might not have made it one of the best Bond films ever, but I definitely think it would have fleshed out the film a little bit more and really kind of ironed out some of those subplots of the films and give it a bit more cohesion to the plot, you know, and bolstered the narrative a little bit more within itself. JX says it suffers from Force Awakens syndrome, ending halfway through a fairly important scene, sort of forcing the movie to pick up there. Exactly. But I don't know. I think the ending of Casino Royale was distinctive enough. We kind of got everything we needed to. He worked his way up the ladder, you know, from the chief to everyone, worked his way to the top of the pecking order, which was Mr. White, takes him by surprise, shows up with a gun over his shoulder. The name's, the name's Bond, James Bond, cuts credits. You don't need to pick it up directly after that. You could infer that he killed Mr. White, that he brought Mr. White in for questioning, and they got everything they needed to. And the next film is a brand new mission with a brand new storyline, and away we go. And I think that would have been much better. I was reading a couple of like the earlier drafts of what the story could have been for Quantum of Solace. And I think in an earlier draft, Vesper's boyfriend was actually going to be one of the main villains, I think, if I remember rightly. I'm just trying to find it here. If I can find it real quick. Let's see. Here we go. So this was the original storyline, apparently. Purvis and Wade's first storyline follows James Bond releasing Mr. White in Siena so that he could then follow him and find his employers. Bond would later infiltrate the mysterious organization, which is being led by the villain Dante, who is aligned with Yusuf Kabira, Vesper's boyfriend. I actually think that sounds a lot better, and I actually think that makes a lot more sense that, you know, he'd release Mr. White, he'd tail him, we get a brand new villain in Dante and the organization. He integrates himself into the organized. I don't know. On paper, and, you know, tying Vesper's boyfriend into that as well, I actually think that sounds like a much more interesting plot than the one that we actually ended up getting. You know, on the note, ultimately what this film is, it's, you know, a quick sort of like 90 minutes-ish Bond film with a topic, you know, the theme of revenge, Bond going on a revenge mission, and it does feel like a really small, intimate story, really. I don't think that storyline is fully realized, and I don't think it's written very well, but of course that's down to the writer's strike. But I do think the ingredients were there for something interesting. I think you could have done something with this. As I mentioned multiple times, I don't necessarily agree that it needed to take place directly after Casino Royale. I do think that hurts the narrative flow of the Daniel Craig era films in that we never really get any episodic films with him. Like, go back to the Roger Moore era, for example, or Sean Connery, how you get so many different adventures. And I just think if they did want to do this as like a closed narrative, when you get to Skyfall in that film and he's talking about being at the end of his career, how he's not physically fit for action anymore. You know, he can't be deployed into the field. He's failing his medical. He's dealing with all of these issues. He's enjoying retirement. That's a story that you do at the end of Daniel Craig's era, like either his last film or his last but one film where, you know, he's ready for retirement, but he's got one more mission in him to, you know, to end all missions. He's got to dig deep and get it done. So narratively, you have basically Casino Royale and Quantum, you have to merge together as one big story. And it ends with him going, you know, oh, I never left, I'm James Bond. And then you're expecting him to go on, you know, a big mission in the next film. And he's doing a mission at the beginning of Skyfall in the opening action scene, don't get me wrong. But then after that, he's just being really miserable and he wants out. And the progression of the character is weird in that regard. And I often think that had Quantum of Solace had just been a random adventure, maybe that would have made the transition into Skyfall a little bit more palatable for me. I don't really know. Craig says, I can't find the stationery. Can you help me look for the I can't find the stationery. Can you help me look? Was the best line. Oh, yeah, that's when he goes to the hotel room, isn't it? That's quite a funny scene, though, where she's got this whole cover story, how their teacher's on a sabbatical, and they go to this really run-down apartment because it fits their cover story. And he's just like, get in the taxi. I'd rather live at, what does he say? I'd rather be in the morgue than stay in that place. Then he goes to this really high-class hotel, and he's like, hey, we're teachers on a sabbatical that have just won the lottery. And then he gets this, absolutely stunning apartment. JX Editor says the boyfriend could be added to Casino. The white stuff could be added to Skyfall. Yeah, I guess so. I mean, you'd have to... That would kind of fuck the opening of Skyfall, though, wouldn't it? I don't know really where you would move the white stuff because, he's got him in a car. He's kidnapped him, and then Mr. White has nothing to do throughout the rest of Skyfall. So I think that would be a bit weird. It's funny as well because we see Mr. White in the opera sequence in this film, and he's got a woman to his right. And I forgot the one line he says when he's in the opera. It's after everyone's got up out of their seats and been identified. Does he say something like, I guess Tosca isn't for everyone, or opera isn't for everyone? And this woman to the right of him goes like, And you infer that that's like his missus or his mistress or something like that. Because clearly at this point, it wasn't intended that, Mr. White would have Madeline Swan and that he'd be a father. And then when we get to No Time to Die and we get the intro scene and we have Madeline Swan's mom who's like passed out on the couch. I mean, I guess this just could be one of his mistresses, right? I guess that's how you could kind of retcon it into it, but I don't know. That was just something I noticed as well, now having the hindsight of No Time to Die. Dude, I'm tired, dude. I just couldn't remember if that was the line, because I knew that was the line at the end of Casino Royale, but I couldn't remember if that was the line that they were also going to repeat and use at the end of Quantum of Solace. But Craig says, it also took me a while to realize when the guy phoned the number on the business card, it sends a tracker to the phone. I thought the tracker was the business card for ages. Yeah, no, that's a great point. And it is fun, though, isn't it? It's like this weird phenomenon where you go and see a film again on the big screen. I mean, granted, I didn't see it on the big screen tonight, unfortunately, but this has happened to me with a lot of the Bond films that I've gone to see week to week since April, that you do notice a lot more things. You could have watched a film many times, but for some reason, when you see it on the big screen, you'll catch things differently. Maybe you're paying attention to things that you've never really paid attention to before when you've watched it. And yeah, it's kind of interesting. So I do like revisiting films. And actually, tomorrow night, I'm off to see... It's not a Bond film, but I'm off to see Pulp Fiction on the big screen. I have seen Pulp Fiction on the big screen before during lockdown when they were playing a lot of the older films when new films couldn't come out. So they were doing a lot of rescreeners. I actually did catch Pulp Fiction at the cinema. So I've only seen it like a couple of years ago, but it's a great fucking film. And I'm sure I'll notice things again that I've never noticed before, or I'll be, you just, that big screen experience, you really can't take it away from it, can you? What else can I say? Okay, let's talk about the music. Let's talk about the music to this thing, because it's a very interesting section on this one. So David Arnold returns to do the music, in which is his, well, so far his last James Bond score. I do think it's a little bit underwhelming for David Arnold, and I don't know how much footage, if he was just dumped with the footage and he didn't really have much time to work on the score, if the script was constantly being changed and the film was being changed and you couldn't really get a good musical sense of what he was trying to achieve with it. Because if you compare this to the score from Casino Royale score is easily one of the best Bond scores that there is. It's fantastic. And this one, you just really, it's David Arnold, so the music's not necessarily bad. I just don't think it's particularly memorable, which is a bit of a shame. Okay, we've got a lot to talk about the music in this thing. So apparently, originally they wanted to get, was it Mark Ronson and Amy Winehouse to do the music for this, because they always tend to go with musicians and singers who were big at the time. Amy Winehouse was absolutely huge around 2008, but apparently they recorded a demo track for the film. But I don't know if that was more Mark Ronson's involvement and they never actually got Amy Winehouse's vocals, because apparently at the time she was going through a lot of legal issues, and she was dealing with a lot of issues, wasn't she? Let's be honest. And apparently, quote, she wasn't ready to record any music. So it's a shame, because I think Amy Winehouse might not be one of my favorite singers of all time, but she has such a distinctive voice. Back to Black actually is a fantastic song. I actually really do enjoy that song, one of hers. So I could imagine her having a very unique voice for a Bond film. And I think her voice would have actually worked really well. So it's a shame that we never really got that because, of everything she was going through. What we ended up getting was, and Craig's going to hate me for this because Craig said he loves this song. So I'm sorry, you just tune out for like the next 5 minutes why I absolutely hate on this song. We get Jack White and Alicia Keys' Another Way to Die, and I absolutely cannot stand this song. It's terrible. This is actually my second least favorite Bond song out of all of them. I'd say my least favorite is Madonna's Die Another Day, because it just doesn't feel like a Bond song. It's just a club song, and it's so repetitive, and it just goes on and on for ages. And this one's just all over the place. The guitar in it sounds horrible. It's a crap solo. The song's all over the place. And the melody never really comes into the film in any respect. However, there is one other song which I always thought was a unreleased Bond song. I always thought it was intended for this film and was passed up for Alicia Keys. And I still believe, I might be putting my tinfoil hat on here, but I do think there is still some truth to that. Throughout the score of this, on a few occasions, you get this little melody line that comes into it. And the melody line is from a song called No Good About Goodbye by Shirley Bassey, which was actually written by David Arnold. Now, I was always under the impression that that song was done, was released, was ready and recorded, and was passed up for Alicia Keys' song, because Alicia Keys, 2008, Alicia Keys is a lot more popular than Shirley Bassey. Modern audiences are probably going to listen to an Alicia Keys song more so than a Shirley Bassey song. It's the sad reality of things, but that's just the way it goes. And the Bond films, as I mentioned, always tend to go with who's popular at the time in the charts. Now, apparently, and I was shocked about this, but No Good About Goodbye actually came out well after this film. I think David Arnold produced an album and got Shirley Bassey involved and recorded that song using motifs that he'd done from Quantum of Solace. But it just makes me wonder, what if that had have been the main theme? And I still believe it would have been. I still believe that David Arnold was working on this song during this. And that's why you get loads of little musical motifs. It's like, no good about goodbye. And you get that rhythm, you get that melody that plays throughout the film. The lyrics, the first opening lyric of No Good About Goodbye, Shirley Bassey, where is the solace that I crave? And the film's called Goddamn Quantum of Solace, so it ties in. All of the lyrics are talking about, trying to let go of the hate, and it's about revenge and trying to find solace, and it's the whole theme of the film is all laid out there in the lyrics of the film, in the lyrics of the song, sorry. And with that musical motif appearing in the film, I really wish that had been the main theme. I still believe it was written. I still distinctly think that it was written for the film specifically, and I think it was good to go. And I think it was passed up for the Alicia Keys song. I genuinely believe that. I don't think that David Arnold was halfway through it or just took ideas that he had for Quantum of Solace and reworked it into a new Bond, a new song for Shirley Bassey that kind of sounded like a Bond song. I think he intended this to be the Bond song. I genuinely believe that. And No Good About Goodbye, if we are going to throw that into the discussion, is a fantastic song. It's actually probably one of my favorite Bond songs. It's Bassey on fine form again, and absolute powerhouse vocals on her as always. Lyrically, I think it's fantastic and it really fits the film. And if you did just replace the Alicia Keys song with that song, I actually think it would have made the film better. I think a change of Bond song can actually make a Bond film better, which actually makes me really curious to see if they would switch out the Sam Smith Spectre song, Writings on the Wall, with Radiohead song, because that was a song. When I first heard the Radiohead version of Spectre that they wrote for the film, I really hated it. I couldn't stand the vocals. The time signature was weird. It was a very weird song. But then having listened to it a whole bunch more times, and then I think someone's done an edit on YouTube where they've put the Radiohead song to the title sequence for the film. I think just in terms of the tone and the mood of it, it really fits that film a lot more. Because Spectre is this really dreary, sort of bland, monotone film, isn't it? And I mean, that's like a backhanded insult there against Radiohead, and I don't mean that, because they are fantastic songwriters. They really are. It wouldn't have been one of the best Bond songs, not by a country mile, but I do think it would have fit that film much better than Writings on the Wall, which just feels like a very generic, and I mean, that's a really bad Bond song as well, let's be honest, Writings on the Wall, but we'll get to that in a couple of weeks' time. We've got a few weeks left before we get to that. JX Edison says, Bond says a lot of questionable dialogue with varying definitions of questionable, but there's one line he says consistently. Shame. Craig says, Odeon Stafford is playing so many older films, but every Tuesday has been Bond, and fantastic to see them all. So glad they did that, but would have loved a box set for the anniversary. Yeah, I wasn't sure. I thought a 4K box set was on the cards. I thought I heard rumors of that. Have they not released it? Have they just released another box set with No Time to Die in? They always tend to release a new box set, don't they, for every Bond film that comes out. So I guess at least now you have a complete 25 film box set of, you know, from Dr. No to the ending film where Bond fucking dies. Oh god, I can't wait to talk about No Time to Die, because I'm just gonna let fly with that one. I still can't believe they did that. It's just so shit. But I guess, you know, if No Time to Die, if you count that as the last Bond film, you know, where Bond fucking dies, then, you know, I guess if you buy the box set now, you've kind of got like a complete James Bond saga, haven't you, at this point? JX Editor says, question for everyone here. Do you preface the title of the movie with James Bond, or do you just say the title? What do you mean? What do you mean? Would you say, the James Bond film Skyfall, or the James Bond film Spectre? No, I think you just say the title of the film, don't you? I think the titles of the film are prominent enough to just run with that, if that's what you're referring to. Craig Walker says, I bloody love Jack White, but to be honest, the one used in the film titles is different to the one used on the CD. Another Time to Die would have been a better title of the film. Yeah, I think if they'd have gone with the actual title of the song, I always think that definitely helps the film. There are some exceptions, of course there are. There are some Bond, You Know My Name isn't called Casino Royale, and it's a fucking great Bond song. It's probably one of the best. But I actually, in all fairness, I haven't heard that CD version. So if the CD version's completely different and it is mixed differently, I might even check that out. I might even give that a listen. But I think it's just because musically, it doesn't really have any cohesion with the actual film it's trying to tell. That the lyrics don't really match much as to what's going on in the film. Whereas the Shirley Bassey one absolutely does, and I think narratively would have really fit the film a lot better. It's the same thing that goes with what happened with David Arnold with Tomorrow Never Dies, where you had K.D. Lang's Surrender, which was going to be the title song of that film, and the score has loads of elements of that theme throughout it, but it was passed up for Sheryl Crow's Tomorrow Never Dies because Sheryl Crow was big at the time. K.D. Lang's get pushed to the ending credits, so I think the same thing was at play, to be honest. Craig says, yeah, but Bond started as an agent in Casino Royale, and it was a 5-film era of the character. Yeah, I just, my take on it is just, I don't think that No Time to Die. God, there's a lot of dies going on in the Bond films, isn't there? I just don't think that No Time to Die needed to end it, with Bond's death. I think that just completely ruins the artifice of what the character is and the conceit of the character, and what has made this franchise run for 25 films now is that Bond never fucking dies, and it's almost like a relay race, handing the baton to the next person to take it up in kind of like a loose sense of continuity. I think you could have still ended the film with, you know, Bond getting the girl at the end or something like that, or driving off with Madeline Swan. I just don't think it needed to end with Bond dying. I think a much better ending for the Daniel Craig era actually is the ending of Spectre. Now, I hate Spectre. I don't think that would have been a good film for him to end the career on, definitely. But that final scene of Spectre, where, you know, he gets the Aston Martin car, he starts it up, you've got the Bond theme kicking in, the camera pans around him, he's got the girl on his left, that, you know, he smirks at her, drives off through London, cut to credits. Fantastic ending. And I actually think, you know, when I first saw that, and Daniel Craig, even himself, I don't think knew he wanted to come back for another one. I think when he did Spectre, he said he'd rather slit his wrists than play Bond again. I thought that was a great ending for the character, and I think they could have done something similar for No Time to Die. I just don't think you needed to kill the character off, but we'll get into that conversation in a few weeks' time once we put the Bond franchise to bed for a while. Anything else that I can say about Quantum of Solace? You know, you've got Felix Leiter in there again. It's great to see Jeffrey Wright come back as a character because I really liked him in Casino Royale. Doesn't really have a whole lot to do in this film. You got David Harbour in there as well as one of the CIA section chiefs. Not really much to say there. General Medrano isn't a fantastic villain either. You know, he's just a bad dude who likes to rape women. That's pretty much it. That's the extent of the character. Judi Dench is still great. You know, that's a positive. She's always fantastic. It's going to be a very emotional next week when she's finally bows out of the franchise. But yeah, I think I've pretty much said everything that I can on Quantum of Solace. I don't have a whole lot more to say about it, really. I think that if I'm going to give my overall opinions on it again, and I just want to say I appreciate everyone for commenting along tonight and getting a conversation going about this one. And it's nice to see people coming around to Quantum of Solace a little bit more. I don't think it's an awful film by any stretch of the imagination. It's not the worst Bond film. At least I don't think it is. I think it's watchable at a 1 hour, 40-minute runtime. It is very short for a Bond film, and I would have liked to have seen it clock over 2 hours, but it moves at a great pace. The director himself wanted it. I think he even compared it to, he wanted it to be like a bullet, like really straight to the point, get the job done kind of thing. And it does exactly that. It just lacks the meat to the story. It feels like it's a race to the next action scene because they don't need to write the action scene. They don't need to have actual dialogue between characters during an action scene, and they can just let the spectacle and the stunt speak for itself, which unfortunately they don't, because the way that it's filmed and the direction of the cinematography is all crazy and the editing's all over the place, and that really does let the action down in this film. But it just lacks the meat to the story. And I think thematically, there's a lot of ideas in this that could have really made it work. I've mentioned that I don't like the idea of it narratively taking place directly after Casino Royale. But if they really wanted to do that and they were dead set on the idea, and apparently they were writing the script and coming up with a story for this thing during halfway through filming Casino Royale. So they clearly knew at the time that they wanted this to be a direct sequel. And that wasn't something that was just made after the fact. This was something that was on the cards and being worked on as Casino Royale was being shot. There's some really interesting ideas there, and an all-out revenge story for Bond, and we've seen that happen before. License to Kill, my favorite James Bond film, at its core is a revenge story, and that works fantastic. It's not this really elaborate world-ending Bond mission that he's on. It's a really intense personal revenge thriller of him avenging his best friend who's been maimed by Sanchez, and the death of his best friend's wife, which itself has a knock-on effect with Bond. And it's almost like a personal revenge mission for him because it resurrects the feelings that he had when he lost his wife, on Her Majesty's Secret Service, which is, the loose continuity between those two Bond films. And it's fantastic. And it's tightly written, and there's some really good characterization in there. And I feel like this film flirts with some of that. You get some genuinely really good scenes, as I mentioned, where Bond's drowning his sorrows at the bar and you get the heart-to-heart with Mathis. That's a really great scene. This film needed more of those scenes, and it needed more, fleshed out dialogue. It needed room to breathe. And unfortunately, the film just couldn't have that because of the writer's strike. So It's not a good Bond film by any stretch of the imagination. There's a lot of problems with it, but I think its heart was in the right place. I think it was trying to be, it did the best with what it could ultimately. And I can't be mad at that. So, although I don't really like this film, as I said, I've watched this quite a few times. I've probably seen Quantum of Solace about 5 times maybe, which is actually a lot more than I have a lot of the other Bond films, which really surprises me. So Quantum of Solace is probably up there in terms of the Bond films that I've watched the most amount of times. There are definitely some good things about it. I'm not saying there isn't, but it just doesn't come together for me. And it's frustrating. It's the potential was there, but everything was against this movie from the off, in terms of what was going on with entertainment at the time. It's just a bit of a shame. But, next time we get Skyfall, I have some positives and negatives about Skyfall itself, and I do think certainly tonally, I think Skyfall was really the nail in the coffin for the Daniel Craig era of the Bond films, and that they did just become really desaturated and miserable and bleak and kind of lost the heart of what an enjoyable escapist Bond film should be. But one thing I will say about Skyfall is that it's very tightly written. There's a lot of nuance in that film, and I'm going to really look forward to talking about that next week. So thank you so much. I mean, Craig, I've just seen that you've subscribed. Thank you for subscribing. I'll get my words out. Thank you for subscribing to the channel, and I really appreciate the positive words as well, and glad that we still got a few more weeks where we can talk about Bond, and that we really enjoy it. It's a really good community where we can just talk about our opinions on the films. It's going to be a shame once again to just say goodbye to the Bond films, but I have really done these for 2 years on the trot now. I did a marathon of the films from April to October last year on my old channel. And I didn't think I'd be revisiting the Bond films as quickly as I have, but with Odeon, screening them week to week since April, I couldn't miss that chance. And I wanted to talk about them again and see how my opinions have changed on them. And I am genuinely gutted I couldn't have made Quantum tonight, because just the OCD in me, it's like I almost saw them all, but I was close but no cigar. But unfortunately, work gets in the way sometimes, doesn't it? And it just wasn't to be. But thankfully, I can say that I will definitely be at the cinema for the next 3. And that's precisely where I'm going to be next week. So check out my Skyfall review. I'm going to be streaming at exactly the same time, 11:30 p.m. British Standard Time. I'm going to be fresh out of that film. I'm ready to give my opinions on it and see if my opinions have changed. That's going to be Tuesday, the 20th September. So if you're into your Bond films, there's a few more weeks for us to get these discussions in. So I do hope everyone does join me next week as well. In the meantime, if you haven't done so already, please let me know what you think of Quantum of Solace. Is it one of your favorite Bond films? Maybe there's probably loads of scenes that I haven't talked about in my review tonight. So anything I forgot to mention, or please do feel free to share your opinions. Let me know what you think of Quantum of Solace and indeed the Daniel Craig era in general, which also takes me on to let me know what your favorite James Bond film is and who your favorite actor to play James Bond is. Maybe it could be Daniel Craig. And as I said at the beginning, maybe Quantum of Solace could be someone's favorite James Bond film out there. Everyone's got their favorite. In case you haven't done so already, although I know that Craig has, be more like Craig. Please do consider subscribing to the channel for more movie reviews, discussions, and live streams. I've actually been streaming quite a lot this week. Yesterday, I did my review on Cobra Kai Season 5. I'm a massive fan of that franchise, a massive fan of that series. So if you've managed to catch up and you've watched all of the Cobra Kai episodes so far, do definitely check out that review because it was really fun to do. TV reviews. I'm going to be back on Friday with episode 4, my review on episode 4 of The Rings of Power, which has been a very interesting series to talk about. Some great discussions in the comments as well. So fingers crossed that will be the case this Friday as well. And yeah, give me a follow on Twitter as well while you're at it. If you subscribe to the channel, if you've hit the bell icon, why not just complete the whole set and give me a follow on Twitter? You can find me at Hobbit Fan Editor. There I'll post all the times that I go live and all the links that you can find me when I stream. I'll keep you guys in the loop with everything. And with Bond rounding out in a few weeks' time, I will be announcing what the next franchise is, what the next big thing that I'm going to be talking about is, because I've got a lot of franchises I want to talk about. There's a lot of directors' filmographies I want to go back to as well. And yeah, I've got some interesting things planned. So please do stay tuned at the channel because we're growing it. We're growing it slowly but surely. I think I hit 80 subscribers Probably 81 now with Craig. So we're getting there. We're getting close to 100. We're pulling it back. So yeah, this is awesome. And Craig's given his favorite right there, Timothy Dalton. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. And Living Daylights is the best Bond and film. I actually really enjoyed Living Daylights a lot more when I rewatched it at the cinema, because the first time I watched it, I was kind of mixed on it, and there are still some elements to it where I'm a bit like, yeah. I think mostly it comes down to the villains. I think the villains are very weak with Living Daylights, but the third act action set piece is fantastic, and yeah, I'm not going to argue with that. Timothy Dalton has my favorite performance as Bond by a country mile. His performance in License to Kill especially is probably my favorite James Bond performance ever. I love the intensity he brings in that role. But I can never say he's my favorite because he only did 2 films. If he'd have done a third one, I think the trilogy would have just, cemented it for me. But because he only did 2, which is one more than one, like George Lazenby, I have to always give it to Roger Moore just because he had the more films under his belt. He did 7 films and loads of those are really entertaining and fun to watch. So I have to give the edge to Roger Moore, but Timothy Dalton does have my favorite performance. So yeah, I can appreciate that, Craig. Anyway, I just want to say a final thank you to everyone that's tuned in tonight, that's commented along, that's taken time out of their night to join me tonight on this live stream. Fingers crossed you all get to join me next week for Skyfall, because that's going to be a really fun one to talk about as well. Until next time, have a very good night. Stay safe, stay excellent, and I'll catch you guys next time. Take care, everyone.